Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and today I'll take you on a spooky story. But don't worry, it will be a gentle and relaxing journey before you drift off to sleep. If you're looking for a tale that's just mysterious enough and gentle enough to relax to, then you've come to the right place. Now, find yourself a comfortable space, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Story 1. The Ghostly Voice. Outside the window. It wasn't always like this. At first, my apartment was just like any other. Quiet, solitary, and ordinary. Or at least, that's how it felt before I began noticing things. Little things. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of work, or perhaps the fatigue that comes with living alone. But as time went on, I realized something darker was at play. Something I couldn't explain. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, at least not before all this started. But the events I've lived through have turned my skepticism into something else. Now, I wake up every day with a deep, gnawing sense of dread that doesn't go away, no matter how hard I try to shake it. The apartment was a simple one-bedroom in a quiet part of the city, nothing fancy. The kind of place where the neighbors are polite but distant, and the air always smells like the mix of old wood and new paint. I liked it here at first. The silence was soothing. It gave me space to think, to process. I'd come home after a long day of work, make a simple dinner, and collapse into bed. The gentle hum of the city lulling me to sleep, but it started on the third night. I had only been living in the apartment for a few weeks at that point, still adjusting to the solitude. The first time it happened, I woke up in the middle of the night to the soft rustling sound of wind. At first, I didn't think much of it. My window, the one by my bed, had always been left open a crack. I was used to the breeze. It didn't bother me. But this time was different. The window was wide open. I hadn't opened it. I was sure of that. I always made sure to close it before I went to bed, even if I didn't sleep with the heat on. The window, a simple thing, just a wooden frame with thin white blinds, was wide open, letting the cool night air rush in. My stomach turned as I stared at it, a cold chill crawling up my spine. I immediately stood up, half out of instinct, half from a growing unease. My first thought was to check if I had somehow forgotten to close it. But when I approached, the room was silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards under my feet. I reached up to close it, my fingers trembling slightly as I fumbled with the handle. The metal felt cold in my hand, almost unnaturally so, as if it had been exposed to the night for much longer than it should have been. I closed the window with a snap, the sound echoing in the otherwise quiet apartment. There was no explanation for it, no draft strong enough to push it open. And yet there it was, wide open, as if inviting someone or something in. I thought I'd just had a restless night. Maybe something caused me to sleepwalk and forget about it. I tried to brush it off, but the feeling lingered. I didn't sleep well that night. Every sound outside seemed amplified. Every footstep, every gust of wind. The next night, I made sure to double-check the window before I climbed into bed. I even made sure the blinds were shut tight, fully covering the view. I wanted to feel safe, wanted to believe that nothing would happen again. But of course it did. I woke up in the middle of the night to the same rustling sound, the same soft, eerie whisper of wind cutting through the silence. This time, I didn't hesitate. I sat up in bed, heart pounding in my chest as I turned to face the window. The blinds were drawn tight, but the window was open, wide open. I bolted out of bed, my feet hitting the floor with a sharp thud, my pulse racing. The cold air rushed in, and I immediately felt the eerie weight of something, no, someone, on the other side of the window. It was the kind of feeling you get when you know you're being watched, but no one's around. I couldn't explain it, but every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong, that I wasn't alone. I slammed the window shut once again, locking it with trembling hands. But this time, the sensation didn't leave. I stood there, frozen, staring at the blinds. The weight of that presence still lingered in the room. I checked the hallway, the kitchen, the bathroom, everywhere. No one was there. Nothing was out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I spent most of my time at work, trying to push everything out of my mind. I even went out for dinner with a colleague, laughing and talking about anything but the apartment. But when I returned home that evening, the dread crept back into my chest. The hallway was silent as always. The air felt too still. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing, but the nagging thought wouldn't leave me. I double-checked the window, as I had every night since the incident. But something was different. The blinds had a slight gap in them, just enough to make me nervous. I stood there for a moment, staring at the thin sliver of blackness, as if something might be waiting just beyond it. The air in the apartment felt thick, suffocating, as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The night passed uneventfully. Still, the fear remained. 2 days later, the worst thing happened. I woke up again in the dead of night. But this time, it wasn't the wind or the rustling sound that woke me. It was a voice, soft, barely audible, like a whisper caught in the wind. But it was there. I heard it clearly, coming from the other side of the window. Let me in. I felt my blood freeze in my veins. My body went rigid as I lay there, barely able to breathe. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, could hear the blood rushing through my head. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just lay there, paralyzed by fear, my eyes fixed on the window. The voice came again, this time louder. Let me in. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, sitting in the corner of my bed, staring at the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The days passed in a blur after that. I wasn't sure if I was imagining things or if something truly sinister was at play. But something was happening. Something that I couldn't explain. Every night, without fail, the window would open by itself. Sometimes I could hear the voice, whispering my name. Sometimes I would wake up and feel the presence of someone standing just outside the window, watching me. But I never saw anything. No figure, no shadow. Just the creeping, suffocating sense that I wasn't alone. I started taking more precautions, but nothing seemed to work. I tried closing the window tighter, locking it, even taping the blinds shut, but the feeling never went away. The voice, the presence, they were always there, lingering just outside my line of sight. I tried everything, talking to neighbors, calling the landlord, even going to a therapist. But no one could offer an explanation. No one could explain why it was happening. No one could explain why I felt like I was losing my mind. Now it's the middle of the night again, and I'm writing this in the dim light of my phone, the only source of light in my apartment. The window is open once again, wide as can be. But this time, I've come to a realization. The thing outside my window is not trying to get in. It's waiting. And I have a sinking feeling that it's waiting for me to make a move. Waiting for me to make a mistake. The sensation of being watched never truly left me after that night. The night the voice whispered through the cold air, pulling me from my slumber with its sinister command. Each day felt like a slow descent into madness. And with each passing night, I felt myself sinking deeper into something I couldn't escape. I tried to keep up a semblance of normalcy. I went to work, made idle conversation with colleagues, and even stopped by the grocery store on my way home to pick up food, as if my life hadn't changed. But inside I was unraveling. The window, the thing outside my window, had started to consume my thoughts. Every moment felt like a countdown, like I was simply waiting for something terrible to happen. When I got home that evening, it was different. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, and there was something off about the way the air hung in the room. The oppressive weight of the silence pressed in on me as soon as I walked through the door. I stood there in the doorway for a few moments, just listening, waiting. My heartbeat quickened as I glanced toward the bedroom, my eyes drawn to the window, the one I had locked and double-checked before leaving. My stomach churned. I took a few steps forward, my shoes tapping softly on the hardwood floor, and the chill in the air hit me like a slap. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees, an unnatural cold that spread from the window like an invisible hand. I didn't need to look. I could already feel it. The window was open again. This time, it was different. The blinds weren't just askew or slightly lifted. They were pulled all the way back, revealing the full width of the window, wide open, as if inviting someone in. The night outside was pitch black, the city streetlights barely casting any light into the apartment. The emptiness of the room felt almost suffocating. But there, in the deep shadows just beyond the window, I could feel something. I knew I couldn't stay in the apartment. I couldn't risk it. It was already too late. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the window. My thoughts raced, and then I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like something moving along the edges of the window frame. It was soft at first, barely audible. But the longer I stood there, the more intense the sound became, growing louder with each passing second, as though something or someone was trying to get in. I snapped out of my stupor and rushed forward, slamming the window shut with a force that sent vibrations rippling through the glass. The scratching stopped abruptly, and the room fell silent once again. My hands trembled as I locked the window, more out of habit than anything else. I stepped back, trying to steady my breathing, my mind swirling with panic and disbelief. I needed to call someone, anyone. But who? The building manager? My neighbors? The police? Would they believe me? The feeling of being watched was growing stronger, more pervasive. Something was out there, just beyond the window, waiting, watching. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I searched for someone, anyone, to talk to. I hadn't told anyone about what had been happening, not my friends, not my family. They would think I was crazy. But even as I scrolled through the contact list, the feeling that I was being watched intensified. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. There was no one here, yet it felt like there was someone in the room with me. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I bent down to pick it up, and that's when I heard the whisper again. Clearer this time. Louder. "Let me in." I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I didn't know if I had actually heard the words or if my mind was playing tricks on me. But there it was again, coming from the window. I felt my stomach turn. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I crouched on the floor, trying to make sense of what was happening. I couldn't take it any longer. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door, locking it behind me. I needed to leave. I couldn't stay in that apartment another minute. The cold outside air bit into my skin, but it was a relief, a break from the suffocating atmosphere inside the apartment. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there. I walked for hours, aimlessly through the dark streets. The world felt strangely distant, as though I was moving through a dream. Every passing car, every flicker of a streetlight, felt like it was part of some twisted nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The whisper, the voice, kept echoing in my head. "Let me in." I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Like the line between what was real and what wasn't was starting to blur. I found myself outside a small 24-hour coffee shop, the neon sign flickering weakly in the darkness. I went inside, sat at a corner booth, and ordered a coffee. Anything to try and ground myself, to stop the madness from taking over. The barista gave me a strange look, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I stared at my reflection in the glass of the window, watching the streetlights cast a faint glow over my tired face. My eyes were bloodshot, and my skin looked pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. I had never felt more alone, more disconnected from the world around me. And then I heard it again, a soft tap. It was coming from the window. I froze, my pulse quickening. I slowly turned my head, glancing toward the glass. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw something, someone, standing just beyond the window, watching me. But when I blinked, the figure was gone. The street outside was empty. I couldn't escape it. No matter how far I ran, no matter how many distractions I found, that presence, whatever it was always there, waiting, watching. I left the coffee shop soon after that. I had to go back to the apartment. I had to face whatever this was. But as I walked through the streets, a thought settled deep in my mind. What if the thing outside my window wasn't trying to get in? What if it was waiting for me to come to it? By the time I reached the apartment building, the sun had started to rise. The early morning light was gray and cold, spilling into the streets like the first hint of dawn in a world too dark. I walked through the lobby, trying to steady my nerves, but everything felt wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, as though something was pressing down on me. I opened the door to my apartment, my heart racing in my chest. But the moment I stepped inside, something hit me. A sharp, metallic smell, like something was burning. It didn't make sense. The apartment was empty. There was nothing on the stove, nothing in the air. But the smell was there, stronger now, filling every corner of the room. I rushed to the window. It was open again, the blinds pulled back completely. revealing the dark night outside. I looked out into the empty street, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I thought I saw something in the shadows, something watching me. But as soon as I blinked, it was gone. I closed the window again, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The presence outside, whatever it was waiting. But why? And why did it feel like it was growing closer? Like it was somehow pulling me in? I didn't know. But I was certain of one thing. I wasn't safe anymore. It's been 3 days since I returned to the apartment. 3 days since I last locked that damn window. Yet, it's only now that the weight of it all has fully settled on me. Like the pressure of a storm hanging in the air, just waiting to break. It's hard to explain, but I feel like I'm walking through a fog. The world around me is distant, muted, as though I'm not fully present. Every moment feels like it's slipping through my fingers, and I'm too terrified to hold on to anything. I've stopped sleeping altogether. The last time I tried, the window was open again. I woke in the middle of the night, heart pounding, breath coming in shallow gasps. I was suffocating, drowning in the air that felt so thick it was almost choking me. The room was freezing, colder than it should have been, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up like they were being pulled by invisible strings. There, in the corner of my vision, I could see the window. I didn't even have to look directly at it to know. It was open again. But this time it felt different. It didn't feel like an accident, like before. No, this time, it felt deliberate. The window had been opened for me. It was almost as if it were waiting, as if it were calling me to it. I didn't sleep that night, and I haven't slept since. Every day, I feel myself sinking deeper into a place I can't find my way out of. The whispers outside, the feeling of being watched, it's never gone away. I can't seem to shake the constant sensation that something is just out of my reach, waiting, lurking in the shadows. I feel it even when I'm at work, even when I'm surrounded by people. It doesn't matter where I am. It's like the air around me is infected, and the only cure is to face whatever is out there, beyond that window. I've tried to stay busy, forced myself to stay active, to go out, to do something, anything. But every time I return home, the apartment greets me with that same chill. I can't help but feel that I'm walking into a trap, one that's been set for me long before I ever realized. Yesterday, after an entire day spent trying to lose myself in work, I came back to the apartment and decided to really deal with it. I wasn't going to run anymore. I couldn't. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal, that it was just some weird, random occurrence. I sat down in the living room and took a deep breath. The apartment was eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of cars passing by outside, the distant hum of the city, trying to get some sleep. My eyes kept flicking toward the bedroom. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront it. Whatever this thing was, whatever was waiting out there, I needed to face it head on. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the bedroom. The door creaked as I opened it, and there, as expected, was the window. The blinds were drawn back, the window wide open. The same feeling of suffocating cold hit me the second I stepped inside. I was no longer scared, at least not in the way I had been before. Now I felt a strange clarity, a sense of purpose. Whatever was on the other side of that window, it wanted me, and I was going to find out why. I stepped toward the window, the floor creaking under my weight. The wind outside had picked up, and I could hear the faint rustling of leaves on the trees below, the sound amplified by the silence of the apartment. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting an eerie glow across the room. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see, but the emptiness outside was almost more unsettling than anything else. The street was deserted. Not a single person, not a single car in sight. The shadows between the buildings stretched long and dark, like fingers reaching out toward me. And just beyond the dim light of the street lamps, I thought I saw something. Something moving. I squinted, trying to focus on it, but there was nothing there. Just the shifting darkness. I turned my attention back to the window. My fingers brushed over the frame, cool to the touch. I had locked it earlier, I was sure of it. But as my hand moved down the metal latch, I could feel it give. It wasn't locked anymore. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the window, at the latch now hanging loosely. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't touched it since I closed it last. I forced myself to breathe. I had to stay calm. I wasn't going to let it control me. I slammed the window shut with more force than necessary, the sound of it echoing through the apartment. But even as I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The air was thicker, more oppressive, as though the very atmosphere had shifted. The moment I closed the window, the whispers started again. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, the same delusions that had plagued me for days. But then, I heard it clearly. "Let me in." My blood ran cold. The voice was closer now, as though it were right on the other side of the glass, just inches away from me. I stumbled backward, my legs weak, and I fell to the floor. My mind raced, but no coherent thought came through. My body was frozen in place, my chest tightening with every breath. For a long moment, everything was still, silent. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was all in my head. But then, the tapping began. Soft at first, like a single finger lightly tapping against the glass. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare make a sound. The tapping grew louder, faster, almost frantic, as though something was desperate to get inside. I could hear it, just behind the window, just behind the glass. I tried to stand, to move, but my body wouldn't obey. My vision blurred, and the room felt as though it were closing in on me. My mind was screaming for me to run, to get out, to leave the apartment and never look back. But I couldn't. I couldn't tear myself away from the window. Then, without warning, the sound stopped. Silence. An empty, suffocating silence that felt heavier than anything I'd felt before. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only hear my heart pounding in my chest, louder than everything else. It was waiting. I knew that now. Whatever was on the other side of that window, it was waiting for me to make my move. It was waiting for me to give in. And I had a sinking feeling that no matter what I did, no matter how many times I locked the window, it would always come back. The same whispers, the same tapping, the same relentless pull towards something I couldn't understand. I don't know how much time passed after that. Minutes? Hours? All I knew was that I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I couldn't stand the feeling of being trapped, of being watched by something I couldn't see. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and rushed out the door, not looking back. But even as I stood in the hallway, trying to catch my breath, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Whatever it was, whatever had been waiting for me outside that window, it wasn't done with me yet. And this time, I wasn't sure I'd make it out alive. I have to find out what it is before it finds me first. I couldn't go back. The apartment was a prison, and I was its unwilling occupant. It had been 3 days since I'd left. 3 days since I had run out into the night, my heart beating wildly in my chest as I slammed the door behind me. But even though I was no longer in that apartment, I could feel it. The oppressive weight of it. The cold. The whispers. It wasn't something I could leave behind. I hadn't been able to sleep since. Not even for a few minutes. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it. The suffocating air. The sharp chill that seemed to crawl under my skin. The weight of unseen eyes watching me. I couldn't escape it. My mind wouldn't let me. And the moment I stepped out of my apartment building, it followed me, like a shadow creeping just out of sight. I spent that first night in a hotel. Not that I slept. I couldn't. I paced the room, unable to shake the feeling that something was waiting for me. Something that was always just around the corner. I tried calling the police, trying to explain what was happening, but they dismissed me. The sounds, the whispers, the window opening by itself. They called it a mental health concern. Told me to go home and get some rest. I hung up, frustrated, terrified, and feeling utterly alone. The second night, I didn't go back to the hotel. I couldn't stand the thought of being in a room that felt so safe. That sense of dread, of suffocating isolation, was closing in on me with every passing moment. I found myself walking the streets again, the cold wind biting into my skin as I moved aimlessly, my thoughts spinning, my mind clouded with fear. The fear wasn't just from the apartment anymore. It had become something more, something worse. The whispers still haunted me, following me even when I couldn't hear them. I felt them in my bones, in the way the shadows stretched longer than they should have, in the way the air felt thick and heavy, like the atmosphere was holding its breath. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening to me. But more than that, I needed to stop it. Whatever it was that had been waiting for me, it wasn't going to stop until I faced it, until I did what it wanted. I didn't go back to the apartment that night, or the next. But then, on the third night, I couldn't fight it anymore. The pull was too strong. The whispers had reached a fever pitch, filling my thoughts with maddening urgency. And deep down, I knew I couldn't escape. I needed to face whatever was out there, whatever was waiting for me behind that window. I returned. I don't know what I thought would happen, but there I was, standing in front of the building, my breath fogging in the cold night air. The street lights flickered overhead, casting eerie pools of light across the pavement, their glow barely enough to cut through the darkness. I hesitated. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to turn around, to leave, to run far, far away from this cursed place. But I couldn't. My feet moved on their own, drawn to the apartment, as if it had become some kind of magnetic force, pulling me back toward the thing I had tried so desperately to avoid. I stepped inside the building, my footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. Everything felt different. The air felt denser, colder. The smell of old wood and stale air seemed thicker, as though the walls themselves were closing in on me. I forced myself to walk up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. My heart was pounding in my chest. But I couldn't turn back. I didn't want to. I needed to know what was going on. I needed to find out the truth. When I reached my apartment, I hesitated once more. The door was just ahead of me. The apartment door that had been my sanctuary for so long, and my nightmare. I could already feel the tension building in the air, that strange, oppressive weight that had followed me for days. I reached out for the doorknob, my hand shaking. The door clicked open, and I stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I wasn't sure what I expected, but the stillness was unnerving. The lights flickered overhead, casting faint shadows that stretched across the room like claws reaching toward me. The place looked unchanged, everything in its usual place. The furniture, the books, the dishes in the sink. Nothing was out of the ordinary, except for the window. I didn't even need to look at it. I could feel it. The window was open. I walked slowly toward the bedroom, my feet barely making a sound as I crossed the threshold. The cold air hit me like a slap, a bone-deep chill that made my skin crawl. The blinds were fully drawn back, and the window was wide open. The night outside stared back at me, dark and empty. The same feeling hit me as before. The feeling of being watched, of something waiting just beyond my reach. I took a deep breath and approached the window. The wind outside was howling now, rattling the glass, but it wasn't enough to drown out the faintest sound, like someone or something breathing. My skin prickled, my heart hammering in my chest as I reached for the window latch. It was so cold, too cold, as if the metal had been exposed to the frigid air for hours. I closed it quickly, snapping the lock shut. The room fell into silence, but that feeling, the one that had gnawed at me for days, didn't fade. It only grew stronger. It was inside the apartment now, closing in on me from all sides, pressing down with suffocating intensity. I didn't know what to do next. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what would happen if I stayed in the apartment any longer. But I couldn't leave. I had no choice. Something inside me knew that the answer was here, hidden somewhere within these walls, behind that window. The whispers, the tapping, the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't just a random occurrence. It was something deliberate. Something that had been watching me long before I even noticed it. I went to the desk and pulled out the journal I'd started writing in when this all began. It was full of strange, disjointed thoughts and observations. Nothing coherent, just a jumble of fear and confusion. I flipped through the pages, searching for any clue that could explain what was happening. And then I found it. The first entry I had written, just days after moving in, stood out to me. It wasn't much, just a short note, a vague memory, but it sent a chill down my spine. I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me from the window. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I thought it was just my imagination, a fleeting thought, a moment of unease that passed. But now, reading it, it felt like a warning. A warning I hadn't paid attention to. I glanced toward the window again. It was closed, locked, but I could still feel it, something waiting outside. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't understand it. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just happening to me. The apartment wasn't haunted. It was alive. And it was waiting for me to make the wrong move. Story 2. Trip across the bridge of the dead. It wasn't snowing that night, but the air felt colder than it should have been. A kind of cold that didn't touch the skin so much as it reached into your bones and made itself a part of you. The kind of cold that whispered something was wrong, long before anything made itself known. I was just passing through. That's all it was supposed to be. A quick shortcut through the hills, over an old bridge my GPS insisted still existed, even though I couldn't find it on Google Maps. I'd missed a turn hours ago, and now my only goal was to reach a motel before midnight. But as the trees grew thicker and the road narrowed, I realized how far I'd driven from anything remotely civilized. I was in West Virginia, or maybe the edge of Pennsylvania. I honestly couldn't say for sure anymore. I hadn't passed another car in over an hour. No street lights, no houses, no signs. Just miles of cracked asphalt and towering trees that leaned in like they were listening. That's when I saw it. The bridge. It appeared out of nowhere. One bend, and there it was, stretching across a black, narrow river like a forgotten relic. The kind of thing you only see in ghost stories or news reports about unexplained disappearances. The structure was old, no doubt about that. Iron supports rusted orange and brown, wooden planks sagging with decay, and a single metal sign half swallowed by vines. It said simply, Hollis Bridge. I slowed the car. Part of me, hell, most of me, wanted to turn around, but there was nowhere to go. The road was one way, twisting and narrow, and backing out wasn't safe in the dark. The bridge was my only choice, so I rolled down my window, just a crack, and listened. Silence. No crickets, no wind, not even the gentle ripple of water. It was like the whole world had stopped breathing. I crept forward. My headlights lit up the bridge in segments, planks riddled with age, the rusted frame trembling with every inch I moved. My tires thumped softly across the wood, and with each bump, I imagined the whole thing collapsing into the icy black water below. And then, I heard it. My name. Eli. Soft, barely audible, but clear. I froze. My foot hovered over the gas pedal. I twisted my head to look out the driver's side window. Nothing, just dark water below, thick and motionless. I shook it off. I hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours. Maybe I was losing it. Just fatigue, just stress. I kept driving. Then again, Eli, help. This time it was louder, and I swear it came from below the bridge. I slammed the brakes. The car rocked to a stop. I stared ahead. 10, maybe 15 feet left before I reached the other side. Just a few more seconds and I'd be across. But instead, I found myself stepping out. The cold air like a slap to the face. Why did I get out? I still don't know. Curiosity? Stupidity? Maybe some small part of me hoped I was wrong. That there was no voice, no whisper, no thing in the water. I walked to the edge of the bridge and looked down. Pitch black, no ripples, no movement, just void. But then, something moved. A pale hand emerged from the surface. Just the hand. It didn't break the water, like something swimming upward. It simply appeared, rising slowly, wrist first, then fingers stretching wide, skin bloated and blue. My breath caught in my throat. The hand twitched, then pointed. Not at me. At the far end of the bridge. I turned to look. Nothing was there. When I turned back, the hand was gone. I ran. I jumped into the car, slammed the door shut, and floored it. Tires squealed across the wood, the whole bridge groaning beneath the weight. I didn't dare look back. I didn't stop until I reached a diner 20 miles down the road. A single building lit up in an ocean of trees. I stumbled inside, breathless, pale, and probably looking like I'd just escaped a crash. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, asked if I was okay. I saw something on the bridge. She froze. What bridge? Hollis Bridge, back up in the woods. Some hand came out of the... She cut me off. There's no Hollis Bridge anymore, she said. It collapsed 20 years ago. I blinked. No, it's still there. I just crossed it. She shook her head slowly. They tore it down after the accident. What accident? She looked over her shoulder, as if making sure no one else was listening. A girl drowned there, slipped during winter. Her car skidded on black ice, flipped, and she went through the ice. They couldn't find her body for a week. When they did, she had claw marks on her throat, as if something dragged her down. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in a motel room 2 blocks from the diner. Every light on, blanket clutched like armor. And just before dawn, I heard it again. Eli. Only this time, it came from the bathroom sink, from the drain. I didn't check. I couldn't check. But the air had gone cold again. And I swear I smelled river water. The sun had barely risen when I left the motel, though it didn't feel like daylight. The morning fog hung low, thick and oppressive, almost like it was suffocating me. As I walked across the gravel lot, my breath formed clouds in the chilled air, despite the fact that I had been running the heater all night. My body ached. I hadn't slept. And my mind was a war zone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. It was the way the shadows lingered longer than they should. The way every creak of the motel floorboards felt too deliberate, too purposeful. The image of that pale hand reaching out from the water wouldn't leave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. Its fingers displayed wide, cold, beckoning. And the whisper, my name. It was like it had settled deep inside my skull. I tried to ignore it, to force myself into some semblance of normalcy. I paid for the room, signed out with a forced smile that didn't feel right. The receptionist didn't look at me, didn't ask if I was okay, as though she already knew. Perhaps she was used to it. Maybe they all were. I found my car, scraping the thin layer of frost off the windshield. My hands were numb, though I wasn't sure if it was the cold or something else. I still couldn't get that voice out of my head. That name, Eli. I had to go back. I knew that. It was like a pull I couldn't explain. Something deeper than curiosity. I had to know why I'd heard that voice, why the hand appeared, why it had pointed at me. I thought about calling someone, maybe a friend, maybe the police. But what would I say? That I saw a ghostly hand from a wreck that happened 20 years ago? That I'd heard voices whispering from under a bridge? It was all madness. I drove back. The bridge was exactly where I left it. I parked 100 feet from the edge, not wanting to tempt fate too much. The fog was thick now, rolling across the bridge in tendrils like it was alive. The river below was swollen, murky, and the black water seemed to be lapping at the edges, whispering to itself. I took a deep breath, hands shaking, and stepped out. The bridge felt different this time. It wasn't just old and abandoned. It felt alive, like the wood was breathing beneath my feet, like the iron rails were groaning with secrets. I kept my eyes focused ahead. not daring to look down at the water below. Eli, it came again, so faint, so distant, that I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't fool myself. It was real. I stepped forward. Each footfall echoed, as though the bridge was amplifying my presence. I could feel it, the presence, the pressure in the air, thick like something was hovering, watching. I reached the middle of the bridge, and there it was again. Eli. Help. Closer this time. So close, I could almost hear it like it was in my ear. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just the fog, the river, and that damn bridge stretching endlessly ahead and behind me. I could feel my heart pounding, the cold sweat gathering at the back of my neck. Then I heard something else. A footstep. A soft, slow footstep. I froze, looking around. The air felt heavier now, the bridge creaking, as though someone was walking toward me. But I was alone. Or at least I thought I was. A figure emerged from the fog, barely visible at first, shrouded in the mist. A woman. Her hair hung long and damp around her shoulders, and her clothes were soaked through, as though she'd just stepped out of the river. Her face was pale, too pale. Her eyes were wide, hollow, blackened with something that wasn't just exhaustion. She looked at me, then whispered, her voice raspy and desperate. "You shouldn't have come back." I stepped back, the blood draining from my face. What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice betraying me, quivering like a leaf in the wind. She didn't answer at first. She just stared at me with those empty, unblinking eyes. There was something wrong about her. Her movements were slow, disjointed, like she was trapped between two worlds. The fog thickened around us, swallowing everything in sight. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath puffing in front of me. But it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the suffocating sense of dread that weighed me down. She spoke again, but this time her words were harder to understand. Garbled, as if they were being dragged through water. "It's been waiting. It wants you." I blinked, confusion washing over me. Waiting for what? She stepped closer. I could smell the stench of decay, of something old, stagnant. Her skin was bloated, as though water had filled her body from the inside out. Her hands hung limply by her sides, and I noticed that her fingers were slightly too long, like they didn't belong, to pull you down into the water. That's when I understood. Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time I saw it, the faintest flicker of recognition. Like she knew me, like she was waiting for me. And then she reached out. Her hand was wet, her fingers trembling with unnatural energy. But before she could touch me, before I could even scream, the ground under my feet gave way, not physically, but mentally. The world around me shifted. I saw the bridge, but not as it was now. I saw it as it had been before. I saw it as the wreck it had been. The way the wood had rotted. The way the iron had bent under pressure. I saw the car. A flash of headlights in the distance, skidding out of control. I saw her, the girl in the water, clawing, struggling. Her face was twisted in a scream that I could almost hear, and I knew, somehow, that this was the same girl. The girl who drowned in... the girl who had never left. I stumbled backward. My breath caught in my chest. And suddenly, the figure was gone. Just like that. Vanished into the fog. But I could still feel her presence, hovering just behind me, waiting. I turned and ran, as fast as I could, but it was like the bridge was stretching, like it would never end. The river rushed below me, louder now, like it was calling my name. I didn't stop until I reached the far side. When I finally made it to my car, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I slammed the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled to start the engine, and that's when I heard it again. Eli. This time, it was coming from the river, but it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream. I drove off without looking back. The fog was still thick and the temperature still dropped, but the one thing that haunted me more than the voice, more than the girl, was the realization that I was already a part of whatever had been waiting on that bridge. I was marked, and I knew deep down that it wasn't over. I couldn't stop driving. The road stretched before me like a dark ribbon, winding through the hills. But I didn't care where it went anymore. I wasn't thinking. I was running from what I had seen, what I had felt, what I had heard. The girl, the bridge, the hand, the scream. It was all tangled together in my mind, like some nightmare that wouldn't let go. But I couldn't keep driving forever. Eventually the car's headlights flickered, and the engine began to sputter, as though it too was exhausted from the madness I had dragged it through. I pulled off the road and into a small rest area that appeared out of nowhere, hidden behind the dense trees. The fog had lifted slightly, but the chill still hung in the air, gnawing at my skin. I parked the car, killed the engine, and sat in silence. The only sounds were my heavy breathing and the distant rustle of leaves. I wanted to sleep. I needed sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Her face pale and bloated, her eyes hollow, reaching toward me from the river. I could still hear her whispering my name, still feel the wet, cold air that had clung to her presence. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make it stop. That's when I noticed something. The air, the space around me, felt too still. It wasn't just the lack of sound, but the feeling of being watched, observed, as if the very world around me had become aware of my presence, waiting for me to make the wrong move. The trees were too quiet, their branches hanging like dark arms ready to reach down and pull me back into the shadows. My eyes darted across the parking lot, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the lot, standing by a bench, was someone. A figure in a long coat, their back to me. I didn't think. I couldn't stop myself. I opened the car door and stepped out, the cold air instantly assaulting me. My heart was still pounding, and I could feel the sweat still clinging to the back of my neck, despite the chill. "Hey!" I called out, my voice hoarse, trembling. "Are you okay?" The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, then another, until I was almost halfway across the lot. And then, without warning, the figure turned. I froze. The woman standing before me was unfamiliar, but there was something about her, something in the way she looked at me, that made my chest tighten. Her eyes were dark, bloodshot, her face drawn tight with worry, and her lips trembled as if she were trying to speak but couldn't. I could see the faintest shimmer of tears in her eyes. You came back." Her voice was raw, barely above a whisper, like she hadn't used it in years. I took a cautious step back. What do you mean?" She tilted her head, as if she were trying to place me. "You were on the bridge. I saw you." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "No, I didn't." "Who are you?" She shook her head slowly, eyes brimming with something darker. "It doesn't matter. I'm not who I was. You're not who you were either. She stepped toward me, her movements slow, deliberate. You felt it, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. My throat had gone dry. She continued. You felt the pull. It's only a matter of time before it comes for you. I took another step back. I don't know what you're talking about. She laughed, but it wasn't a laugh. It was hollow, like something inside her had already died. No, you do. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. This is what you're running from. She handed it to me, her fingers cold and trembling. I looked at the picture in my hands. It was grainy black and white shot of an old bridge, the one I had crossed. In the photo, the bridge was whole, standing tall and proud, with no signs of decay. But there was something else. There, standing at the edge of the water, was a young girl, barely more than a child. Her face was partially obscured by her long, wet hair, but her eyes were clear, piercing. They seemed to stare right into me. That's the girl, I said, though I wasn't sure how I knew. But the fear that surged through me was undeniable. She drowned. She's the one who died. Yes, the woman nodded. But she never left, and neither did the bridge. It keeps them. She stepped back again, her eyes never leaving mine. It calls to you, doesn't it? That's why you came. That's why you can't leave. I wanted to scream at her to stop, to make sense of what she was saying, but the words stuck in my throat. My body was locked in place, unable to move, as though the very air was pressing against me, forcing me to listen. You don't understand, she whispered. You can't, but you will. Eventually, suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled. I felt it before I heard it, like a low hum, vibrating in my chest. Then the sound came, a distant crack, like ice splitting across a frozen lake. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes widened in panic. What was that? I gasped, looking around. The woman's lips curled into something close to a smile. The bridge, she said simply. It's awake. I looked at her, the panic surging up inside me. And then I turned, my heart pounding in my chest. But before I could run, she grabbed my arm, her fingers cold and tight. No, she said, her voice like ice. You can't run anymore. It's too late. You've already crossed the line. I pulled away, the cold sensation from her touch still seeping into my skin. No, I can't. I don't want to be here. I began backing away, stumbling toward the car. I heard her laugh behind me, but it wasn't the laugh of a person. It was something else, something deep, hollow, and ancient. I reached the car, threw open the door, and slid inside, slamming it shut with a force that rattled the frame. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. But the engine sputtered to life, and I slammed the gear shift into drive. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. But the moment I hit the gas, I felt it again. The pull. That same tugging sensation, as though something deep below the earth was reaching up to drag me back. The road stretched ahead, and the fog began to roll in once more. But now, as the trees grew darker, I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it. It was there, waiting for me, and I couldn't outrun it. Story 3. The only escape is death. I had been driving for hours, my tires eating up the endless stretch of highway, my eyes heavy with fatigue. It wasn't the longest trip I'd ever taken, but after the long day at work and the dull monotony of the drive, I found myself wishing for a place to rest, just somewhere quiet and off the beaten path. The headlights of my car cut through the thickening mist that seemed to cling to the road like a living thing. It was strange. This fog, it appeared out of nowhere, as if it had risen from the earth itself. The more I tried to ignore it, the thicker it seemed to get. I had missed the exit I was supposed to take and decided to turn around at the next town. That's when I saw it. In the distance, nestled against the backdrop of towering pines and a deep, unnatural silence, was a sign that read, "Welcome to Havens Hollow." Havens Hollow. It sounded like a sleepy little place, perhaps too sleepy, a town lost to time. I'd never heard of it before, but I didn't care much. A quiet town meant a peaceful night. I needed somewhere to clear my head, so I steered the wheel in the direction of the sign. The road that led into Havens Hollow was winding and narrow, the fog thickening with every passing second. The only sound in the air was the constant hum of my car's engine, the occasional squeak of my brakes as I made turns sharper than I expected. The silence was suffocating. As I drove deeper into the town, the streetlights seemed oddly dim, casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement. There was a heaviness to the air, like the very town itself was waiting for something. The houses, all worn down with peeling paint, looked abandoned. No signs of life, no cars parked in driveways, no children playing in front yards. It was as if the town was holding its breath. I eventually reached what seemed to be the center of the village. A small dilapidated building with a rusty sign that read Havens Hollow Inn. The place was old, but it seemed to be the only functional establishment in this ghost town. I pulled into the parking lot and, with a sigh, got out of the car. The door to the inn creaked as I pushed it open. The smell of old wood and dust hit me immediately. The air was stale, the walls cracked with age, and the faint hum of a ceiling fan was the only thing that made noise in the otherwise quiet room. Behind the counter, a woman looked up at me with dull, lifeless eyes. Her pale skin made her look like she hadn't seen the sun in years. She wore a faded floral dress, her hair pulled back into a tight, unkempt bun. "Can I help you?" she asked in a voice that was almost a whisper. I nodded, trying to shake off the eerie feeling settling over me. "Just need a room for the night. I'm on my way to... well, I'm not sure." I got lost. Her lips twitched into something that resembled a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "We don't get many visitors, not at this time of night. You're welcome to stay, but I'll warn you. Havens Hollow isn't like other places. You'll find it's not quite what you expect." I was taken aback by her words, but I shrugged them off. "I'm just here for the night. Should be fine." She handed me a key, and I made my way upstairs. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and the faint sound of whispers seemed to echo down the hall. I paused, but the hallway remained empty. I opened the door to my room. The bed was small, and the furniture looked as though it had been there for decades. The windows were tightly shut, but I could still hear the faint rustle of wind outside. I sat down on the bed, my body aching from the long drive, and stared out at the fog that enveloped the town. As the night stretched on, I found it harder and harder to ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like there was a pressure in the air, something waiting. My thoughts drifted to the odd woman downstairs. She hadn't seemed normal, almost dead. Around midnight, the sound started. At first, it was a distant scraping noise like nails running against wood. Then it came closer, slowly at first, then louder. A thud, a heavy guttural groan. It sounded as if it was coming from beneath the floorboards. I tried to dismiss it. Probably just the house settling. Maybe it was the wind blowing through the cracks. But then came another sound. A whisper, low and hoarse, and it was coming from behind the door. I stood up, my heart racing in my chest, and walked toward the door. The whisper grew louder. Come. Come outside. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. But before I could open it, I heard something else. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving down the hall toward my door. I turned to the window, hoping to see some sign of life outside. But there was only the fog. The mist had thickened to the point where the town itself had vanished from view. The footsteps grew louder. I backed away from the door, my mind spinning, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The door handle jiggled once, twice, and then stopped. For a moment, all was still. Then a loud crash echoed through the hall. A crash like wood splintering. It was followed by a scream unlike anything I had ever heard before. It wasn't human. It was raw, animalistic. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling as I tried to dial 911. The signal was weak, barely a bar, and then it dropped completely. I had to get out of there. I rushed to the door, but when I opened it, I was met with nothing but darkness. The hallway was empty, save for the faint glow of the gaslight. At the end, I could feel my pulse in my ears as I moved forward, each step echoing through the silence. I reached the staircase and descended as quietly as I could. But the creaking of the steps seemed to betray me. My stomach churned with every step I took. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. I turned toward it. A shadow, long, almost unnatural, was moving just beyond the doorway of the main hall. I froze. Then it came. From the darkness emerged figures, tall, hunched creatures with ashen pale faces, their eyes sunken deep into their skulls. They were dressed in ragged clothes, their skin torn and rotting. They shuffled toward me, their gnarled hands reaching out as if they could smell my fear. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the realization that the dead, were walking among the living. The creatures stopped in front of me, and for a moment, I thought they wouldn't notice me. But then, one of them opened its mouth, revealing jagged yellow teeth. It lurched forward. This was their village. This was where the dead were reborn. I can still hear the scratching sound, the scraping of nails against the floor, echoing in my mind. The creatures, the dead, they were so close that I could smell them, that pungent mix of decay and rot. I didn't know how long I stood there paralyzed, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. It felt like an eternity, a dream I couldn't wake up from, but I did wake up. It wasn't a dream. I bolted from the stairs, my legs barely carrying me as I stumbled into the dark, vacant hall. The hallway stretched out before me, swallowed up by the impenetrable fog outside the inn's cracked windows. But I didn't care. I had to get out of that place. The air was thick with dread. Every shadow seemed to shift with life, and every corner felt like it was hiding something worse than what I had already seen. The whispers continued, like a persistent hum in my mind, urging me to leave. I raced down the corridor, my footsteps loud against the wood. There was no way I was staying here. I had to get out. I had to... Thud. I stopped in my tracks. A heavy, muffled sound, like something or someone had just been dropped onto the floor. My breath caught in my throat as the air around me grew even heavier, more oppressive. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in. I turned around, straining my eyes in the darkness. The shadows seemed to dance, twisting and contorting with each movement I made. My body screamed for me to run, to keep moving forward, but something held me there. It was the sound, a low groan that came from behind one of the doorways. Another figure, another corpse, stepped into the hallway. My body froze, every muscle tense, heart hammering in my chest. This one wasn't like the others. It was different. It wasn't hunched or disfigured like the ones I had seen before. This one was tall, its figure almost human in shape, but its eyes, those eyes were wide, unblinking, as if they were staring right through me. The creature's skin was pale, too pale, stretched tight over its bones, and its lips were pulled back in an unnatural grin, exposing rows of teeth that seemed far too large for its mouth. I stumbled backward, but it didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. "Please, please," I whispered to myself, but the words were strangled in my throat. My mind raced. There was no explanation for this. This wasn't normal. None of this was. I glanced down the hallway again, my gaze darting back and forth between the dark, the creature, and the stairs that led back up to the room. I couldn't go back there. The door was still wide open, my only escape route. But as I took a step forward, the creature didn't blink. It tilted its head at me, almost as if it was studying me. The door, I thought. I have to make it to the door. With a deep breath, I turned and sprinted for the entrance, ignoring the feeling of the cold air pressing against my skin. The shadows seemed to stretch endlessly, and every creak of the floorboards made my heart skip a beat. I burst through the door, and the cool night air hit me like a slap in the face. The fog was even thicker now, swirling around the building in a ghostly dance. The town was eerily quiet, too quiet. I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me, the mist clinging to the trees like a shroud. The dim lights of the inn flickered behind me, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced against the walls. I had to get away. I turned to run, but then a sound stopped me cold. A low, guttural moan. It was coming from behind me, from inside the inn. They were following me. I didn't waste a second. I ran, faster now, through the thick fog, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind was a jumbled mess of thoughts, trying to piece together what was happening. Why were they here? Why this town? What is going on? I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to understand it. There were no other cars on the road, no signs of life in any direction. It was as if the entire town was completely empty. The air was damp, and each breath I took felt heavier, as if the fog itself was poisoning the air. Suddenly, I saw it, a flicker of movement, something far ahead of me, and the sound of a door creaking open. I froze, my body tensing as I tried to make out what it was. Through the fog, a shadowy figure stepped into view. A man. He wore a coat that flapped in the wind, his face obscured by the fog and the dim light of the street lamps. He didn't seem to notice me at first. his gaze trained ahead, scanning the area. Then, his eyes snapped to mine. For a brief moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. Someone else. Someone who could explain what was happening. Someone who might help. But that relief was fleeting. The man's eyes were hollow, sunken deep into his skull, his expression void of any recognition or empathy. "Get away," he said, his voice hoarse and raspy. It was a whisper, barely audible, yet it struck me like a slap to the face. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but as if to push me away. I took a step back. The man didn't move toward me, but his eyes remained locked on mine, unblinking. "You need to leave. You're too late," he said again, his voice tremulous, like he was trying to hold on to his humanity. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What's going on here?" I asked, my voice breaking. The man's lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more. But then, his face contorted in pain, and he screamed. Not a human scream, but something else. Something unnatural, full of agony and terror. His body jerked as if an invisible force was twisting him from the inside out. He collapsed to the ground, twitching and writhing in the dirt. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The sound of his screams echoed in my mind, mixing with the distant whispers that still surrounded me. Then, just as quickly as it started, he stopped. His body lay still, his eyes staring up at the sky, vacant and lifeless. And I knew then. I knew that I was too late. Whatever had happened to him, whatever curse had descended on this village, it was already too far gone. There was no escaping it. I took one last look at the motionless man and turned to run. But as I did, I saw something else. Something moving in the fog ahead of me. And this time, it wasn't just one thing. It was many. They were coming for me. The dead were awake, and they would not rest until they had me too. I ran. I don't know how long or how far, but I ran like I had never run before. My heart pounded in my chest, each breath sharp and ragged. The fog pressed in on me like it had a life of its own, smothering the world around me. The shadows danced, and the world was reduced to a suffocating blur of gray and black. The dead were following me, and they were closing in fast. Every step I took, I could feel their cold presence behind me. There were no sounds, no footsteps, just the unnerving silence of the fog, broken only by the occasional scrape of something dragging across the ground. The figures in the mist were relentless. They didn't need to chase. They didn't need to hurry. They were always there, lingering just at the edge of my vision, their rotting forms creeping closer, as if they were waiting for me to collapse from fear, from exhaustion. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The road stretched out before me, the streetlights flickering in and out, casting brief glimpses of the world around me. The trees on either side of the road loomed like monstrous skeletal arms, their twisted branches reaching for me. I couldn't make out the shapes clearly, but I could feel them, watching from the darkness. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very atmosphere was trying to swallow me whole. I stumbled down the road, my feet slipping on the wet pavement, the damp fog clinging to my clothes. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of reality that were falling apart around me. I needed to think. I needed to understand what was happening. The man, his body lying lifeless in the street, eyes wide open, staring into the abyss. His last words had echoed in my mind. "You're too late." What did he mean by that? What had happened to him? To this village? Why were the dead walking? And what was I supposed to do about it? I didn't have any answers. I didn't have a plan. I was just running, hoping for an escape that seemed increasingly impossible. The fog began to lift, and for the first time since I had arrived in Haven's Hollow, I could see something other than the mist. A building loomed ahead of me, its silhouette faint but distinct against the dim light. It was an old structure, a stone building with weathered bricks and cracked windows that seemed to look back at me with hollow eyes. It looked abandoned, just like the rest of the town, but something about it felt different. Something pulled me toward it. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to keep running, to keep moving. But there was something about this building, something that felt like the answer to the madness swirling around me. I approached the door cautiously, every nerve on edge. The building was eerily silent, no sounds of life, no movement inside, just the stillness of something long forgotten. I hesitated for a moment, then reached out and turned the handle. The door creaked open, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. Inside, the air was heavy, musty, and stale. The walls were covered in layers of dust, and the wooden floors groaned under my weight as I stepped inside. The faint smell of mildew mixed with something else, something more metallic, like rust. I glanced around, trying to make sense of the place. It looked like an old library, shelves lined with books, some in disarray, others perfectly stacked. But there was something about the way the books were arranged. It didn't feel like a place of knowledge. It felt like a place of containment. The shelves were old, but many of the books were disturbingly new, almost as if they had been placed there recently, shoved into the corners, the edges of the shelves. Some of them were even stained with what looked like blood. As I moved further into the room, I spotted a desk at the far side, behind a curtain of tattered velvet. Someone had been here recently. There was no doubt about it. The dust on the desk had been disturbed, and there were papers scattered about, some of them covered in strange, looping handwriting. I took a step forward, my hand reaching out instinctively toward one of the papers. It was a journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. I pulled it closer. The pages yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. The writing was frantic, almost panicked. "They're coming for us. We can hear them now. The dead are awakening, and we can't stop it. It's too late. There's nothing we can do. We'll all be gone by dawn." My pulse quickened as I flipped through the pages. Each entry grew more desperate, more cryptic. "The resurrection has begun. The curse is eternal. Only those who are chosen will survive." The handwriting shifted again, becoming jagged and distorted. "The rebirth is upon us. The village will be reborn, and we will all take our place among the dead." I slammed the journal shut, the noise echoing in the silence of the room. My head was spinning. The words, resurrection, curse, rebirth, they made no sense. But something deep in my gut told me they weren't just random words. They were the key to everything. I had to know more. I had to understand what the hell was going on. The sound of shuffling footsteps broke my concentration, sending a spike of panic through my chest. I whirled around, my heart thudding against my ribs. There, in the dim light of the doorway, stood a figure. Another one of them. But this one was different. It was a woman, her face gaunt and pale, her long hair matted and tangled. Her clothes were torn, stained with dirt and something darker, something that looked like blood. Her eyes, those hollow, lifeless eyes, locked onto mine, and I felt a chill run through my veins. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she lifted a trembling hand, pointing toward the back of the room. I couldn't tear my gaze away. The silence stretched on, oppressive and thick, and then, as if a finger had cast a spell, I felt an undeniable compulsion. Without thinking, I moved toward the back of the room, the footsteps of the woman following me like a haunting echo. At the far end of the room, I saw it. A door. A wooden door, old and weathered, its frame cracked and splintered. The air around it was thick with a strange energy, a force I couldn't explain. The woman was gone, her presence now replaced with an overwhelming sense of dread. I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. There was something beyond it, something I had to see, something I had to know. I opened the door. What I saw inside made my stomach churn. The room was small, dimly lit, with a single chair placed in the center. The walls were covered in symbols, strange markings that looked ancient and otherworldly. But the thing that took my breath away was the body. It was a man, but not just any man. He was alive, yet dead, his skin gray and decaying, his eyes wide open, but unseeing. He was strapped to the chair, his body twitching sporadically, as if something inside him was fighting to break free. His mouth was open, his lips peeling back, but the sound that came from him wasn't human. It was a low, rasping hiss, like something trying to crawl out of his throat. I backed away, my mind reeling. What was this place? What were they doing to him? And why did I feel the same cold, suffocating presence from the man in the chair as I did from the ones who were following me? The answer was clear now, as clear as the fog that had engulfed the village. Havens Hollow wasn't a town of the living anymore. It was a prison, and the dead were reborn every night. And I had just stepped into the heart of it. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the man in the chair. His body twitched and spasmed, as if he were trapped in some kind of nightmarish struggle. Flesh rotting, eyes wide, but vacant, and yet alive. Alive in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The longer I stared, the more I could feel the weight of his suffering, as though I too were being pulled into his torment. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stepped back from the door, trying to distance myself from the horrific scene. The symbols on the wall seemed to pulse and shift, as though they were alive, etched into the very fabric of the building, binding it in some ritual I couldn't understand. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, pressing against my chest. The man in the chair, his skin hanging loosely from his bones, seemed to notice me. His gaze shifted slightly, his eyes flicking toward me. And for a fleeting moment, it was as if his hollow, lifeless eyes recognized me, as if he knew I had stepped into this cursed place. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just a wheezing rasp. I stumbled backward, the room spinning around me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey. The terror I felt was so overwhelming, so deep in my core, that it was as if the room itself had become a part of my body, pulling me into its darkness. What the hell is this place? I thought, my mind reeling. The man in the chair, his movements erratic, seemed to be begging for something. His body was not his own. It was as if something, some force, was controlling him from within. The darkness in his eyes seemed to swallow the faint light of the room, drawing me into a vortex of despair and confusion. I didn't understand it, but I knew I couldn't stay. I turned and bolted from the room, the air around me cold and oppressive. My feet pounded against the floor as I ran down the narrow corridor, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind. I could still hear the man's rasping breath echoing in my ears, feel the weight of his gaze on my back, as if he were watching me from every corner, from every shadow. The fog outside had thickened even more, wrapping the village in a blanket of eerie silence. The only sound now was the echo of my footsteps against the empty streets. I had to get out. I had to leave Haven's Hollow, but where could I go? There was nowhere to run. The town was a labyrinth of decay and death, its walls closing in on me, its shadows stretching longer and longer. As I ran through the fog, I heard something behind me, a shuffling, scraping sound, as if something was dragging its feet, moving closer and closer. I dared not look back. I could feel it. The creatures were near. They were always near. It was as if they were drawn to me, their cold, lifeless forms stalking me from the shadows, waiting for the moment when I would collapse from fear or exhaustion. I had to keep moving. I stumbled upon a dilapidated building, its windows cracked, the door hanging off its hinges. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, but I didn't care. I shoved the door open and stepped inside, the stale air hitting me like a slap. The building was cold, empty, save for the rotting furniture and dust-covered surfaces. It looked like another place, abandoned to time, but something felt different about it. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I stepped deeper into the darkness. The room was large, but there was no real light. Only the faint glow of the street lamps outside that barely cut through the fog. I moved cautiously, my eyes darting from corner to corner, every creak of the building sending a chill down my spine. I could feel something watching me, something unseen, something that shouldn't be here. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping in my chest. But no one was there. The silence in the building was suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. Then I heard it, a whisper. "You should not have come here." The voice was soft, almost melodic, but it carried a weight of menace that sent a shiver down my spine. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The voice came from somewhere deep within the building, though there was no one in sight. I stepped forward, my steps hesitant, the weight of the words lingering in my mind. "You should not have come here." What did that mean? What was this place? Who was speaking to me? The air around me grew colder, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow darker, more oppressive. I took another step forward, my hand reaching out to touch the wall for support. When I felt it, a cold, clammy hand brushed against mine. I screamed and pulled my hand back, but nothing was there. Just the oppressive silence, thick and suffocating. But the voice came again, this time louder, more urgent. "The curse cannot be undone. You cannot leave." The walls seemed to pulse with the sound of the voice, vibrating under my skin, a pressure that filled the air and weighed me down. I looked around desperately, searching for the source, but there was nothing. The room was empty, just shadows and decay. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My heart raced, my mind spinning with confusion and terror. What was happening? Why was this happening to me? I ran, desperate to escape the suffocating air and the whispers that filled my ears. But the moment I turned to leave, I saw them. Figures in the doorway, shadows moving in the mist. The dead, they were everywhere. There were too many. I couldn't count them. Their bodies were twisted, deformed, their eyes sunken and lifeless, their skin hanging loosely from their bones like discarded rags. They shuffled toward me slowly, their hollow eyes fixed on me as if they were drawn to me by some unseen force. My legs went weak beneath me. I could feel their presence closing in, the cold air thickening, the weight of their gaze pressing down on me. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body refused to obey. It was as if the air itself had wrapped me in chains, holding me in place, forcing me to face the horrors that waited. And then, the woman appeared. She stepped out from the shadows, her pale face as lifeless as the others, her eyes wide and empty, her skin ashen. Her clothes were torn, stained with blood, and she moved toward me with a slow, deliberate gait. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I could feel her gaze, cold, unfeeling, like the rest of them. She was one of them. She had been reborn. Her mouth opened, and she let out a soft, high-pitched laugh. It was a laugh that chilled me to my core. A laugh that sounded as though it came from the depths of the earth itself. The dead were watching, waiting. They were all watching, waiting for me to break. And I realized then, with sickening clarity, that I wasn't meant to escape this place. I had walked into the heart of the curse. I had come to Haven's Hollow to die. The woman took a step closer, her breath ragged, and then the world around me went black. The dead were watching me, and soon I would join them. Story 4. Police hunting the monster. I didn't believe the stories at first. I figured it was just another urban legend, maybe an escaped zoo animal or one of those sick viral hoaxes that always end up going too far. But I was wrong. It started one evening around dusk, a time of day when the world feels both familiar and oddly detached, like everything's been washed in a fading blue filter. I was walking home through the industrial part of the city. Warehouses, shuttered stores, cracked sidewalks with tufts of grass pushing through. The kind of place that looks like it's waiting to be demolished. I had taken this shortcut for years. It saved me 20 minutes. That night, I heard something strange in the distance. Something between a scream and the metallic groan of something heavy being dragged. It came from behind one of the old freight buildings to my left. A skeletal structure made of rust and shattered glass. I froze. It wasn't just the sound itself. It was the feeling it gave me. Like something deep in my chest had turned to ice. I should have kept walking. But something made me step closer, toward the half-collapsed wall. I peered through a hole where a sheet of corrugated metal had peeled away, revealing the inside of the warehouse. That's when I saw it. It was hunched over something, or someone. I couldn't tell. Its back was arched in a way that seemed anatomically wrong, like its bones had been bent or rearranged. Its limbs were too long. It had a grayish skin, the texture of damp concrete, and something like a tail, or maybe a spine, jutting from its lower back. It didn't move like a person. It twitched, like a marionette with tangled strings. Then it looked at me. Not turned, just looked. The moment its head tilted in my direction, I knew it had seen me. even through the shadows, even from across the room. I ran. I didn't look back until I was a block away. I nearly twisted my ankle on a cracked curb, but I didn't stop. My breath burned, and my heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I knew what I saw wasn't human. I knew something unnatural had found its way into the city. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying what I saw over and over, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, that my imagination had filled in the blanks. But the sound it made, that droning metallic screech, it rang in my ears even after I buried my head under the pillow. By morning, things got worse. The city was different. There were roadblocks in places that had never seen traffic stops before. Unmarked vans patrolled the neighborhoods. At first, I thought maybe there was a chemical spill or a terrorist threat, but the police weren't local. They wore jet black uniforms, no badges, no names, and carried weapons I'd never seen outside of science fiction movies. I caught a glimpse of one as I passed through a checkpoint on my way to the grocery store. His eyes never blinked. He looked at me like I was already contaminated. They weren't letting anyone in or out of the city anymore. People started whispering, neighbors talking in hushed tones, rumors flying around like mosquitoes. Some said a plane had crashed in the woods outside of town. Others said there was a serial killer wearing people's skin. But the most unsettling rumor was one I heard from a homeless man I'd seen around for years. His name was Reggie. I found him hiding in the alley behind the old movie theater, his face covered in grime and fear. They came from the sky, he muttered, not even looking at me. They don't eat, they take. They wear your face, but they're not you. I tried to ask him what he meant, but he just kept muttering the same phrase over and over. They wear your face. Later that evening, the air turned heavy. Not just humid, but thick. It was hard to breathe. The sky had taken on a sickly orange hue, and there was a faint, low hum in the background that didn't stop, like an electrical buzz behind reality. I turned on the news, but every channel was frozen or looping the same message. Shelter in place. Authorities are working to resolve the situation. Stay indoors. Do not attempt to leave. There was no footage, no explanation, just static and those cold, robotic instructions. I couldn't stay in the apartment. It felt like the walls were closing in. I needed answers. I needed to see what was happening. So I left. The streets were nearly empty. The few people I did see walked like ghosts, eyes darting toward every shadow. I made my way to the edge of the city near the train tracks, hoping to find a way out. That's when I noticed the smell, like burnt hair and rotting meat. The air shimmered near the tracks as if reality was bending, heat wave style. But it wasn't hot. And then I saw the truck. It was overturned, its tires still spinning. A body lay nearby, motionless, too still to be sleeping. As I got closer, I saw movement in the grass beside it. A woman was crawling, blood trailing from her mouth. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. She tried to speak, but only gurgling came out. I bent down trying to help her. That's when I heard the growl. Not from a dog, not from anything I've ever heard before. It was deep guttural, layered with something wet and inhuman. I turned. It was standing near the tree line, half in shadow, half in this world. It was different from the first one I saw. Its face looked more familiar, like a mask pulled too tightly over something wrong. Its eyes weren't eyes. They were reflections, my reflection, looking back at me. I didn't run this time. I couldn't. It raised one arm, elongated and trembling, and pointed at me. Then, behind it, another figure appeared. Then another, 3, then 5, then more. They were crawling out of the dark like ants from a crack in the ground. I don't remember how I got away. I must have blacked out. When I woke up, I was in a drain tunnel beneath the bridge near Lincoln Nave. My hands were scraped raw. My jacket was missing. There were bruises on my ribs like something had gripped me and let go. I don't know how long I have, but I know this. The city isn't sealed because of a threat inside. It's sealed to keep the truth from getting out. And whatever those things are, they're not hunting at random. They're replacing us, one by one. And now, they've seen me. I've never felt so utterly, terribly alone in my entire life. After the chaos of that night, watching the thing that looked like me but wasn't me, I should have stayed hidden. I should have locked myself inside my apartment, clung to the small shred of safety that remained. But something in me, some strange mix of fear and curiosity, pulled me back out onto the streets. I couldn't stop myself. I found myself walking back toward the train tracks. It was absurd, almost like a sick kind of déjà vu, as if I had to see it again, to understand what had happened, to make sense of the nightmare that had already begun. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing. I kept saying that maybe I could find someone who had answers, someone who could explain the things I'd seen. The monster, the whispers, the strange fever that had gripped the city. But every step I took felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached the tracks again, the air had thickened. It wasn't just the same oppressive, humid weight that had descended the night before. It was something else. Something wrong. The smell of burnt hair and decay was back stronger now. But there was something else too. A chemical stench, like something had been spilled in the water, like poison, had mixed with the air. I tried not to breathe too deeply, but it was impossible. It was everywhere. There was no sign of the overturned truck or the woman I'd seen earlier. The tracks were quiet, eerily quiet, and the city beyond felt empty, as if it had been hollowed out. There were no people, no cars, no sounds of life. It was as if the entire place had been swallowed by something far worse than any virus or disaster. It had been swallowed by fear. I walked to the edge of the tree line and stopped. There, in the shadows, I saw something. It wasn't a person. It wasn't anything that should have been standing still in the dark. A figure crouched by the tree line, its body twisted at an impossible angle. The skin was pale and waxy. The head was too large for the shoulders, and the neck was bent at an unnatural curve. The face was twisted into a grotesque mockery of a human expression, like it had been pulled too tight over something that didn't belong. It wasn't one of them. It was worse. This thing, this one had human eyes. I didn't know if it saw me or if it simply felt me standing there. But I swear to God, the moment its gaze locked on mine, I could hear my heart stop. The world felt like it spun, and the air seemed to close in around me. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was frozen. It was like being paralyzed by some invisible force. And for a moment, I thought I might lose my mind. But then, something else happened. The thing moved. Its limbs jerked and stretched in a way that defied human movement. I heard the snap of bone and tendon, but it didn't sound like it was coming from the thing. It was coming from inside my head. And then the scream came. It wasn't a scream. It was a sound, a high-pitched shriek that burrowed into my ears and clawed at my brain. I dropped to my knees, my hands pressing against my skull, trying to block out the noise. It felt like my own thoughts were drowning in the sound, like it was pulling me into a pit of madness. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I looked up, expecting to see the thing gone. But it wasn't. It was closer now. Closer than it had been a moment ago. I stumbled back, but my legs weren't working. I felt the ground beneath me, felt my body tilt and tip. But all I could do was fall to the earth. My palms scraped against the dirt. My breath came in shallow gasps. My heart was hammering in my chest. And then I heard voices. Not just one voice, several. They were low, hushed, like whispers at the edge of my awareness. But as they got closer, they weren't just whispers. They were commands, orders. I could hear them now. Distorted, unnatural, and yet somehow so familiar. And then I saw them. The soldiers. They were standing just outside the tree line, a dozen of them. They wore black uniforms, their faces hidden by dark helmets. But there was something wrong about them too. They didn't seem human. Their movements were stiff, their heads jerking in odd angles, like marionettes whose strings had been tangled. "Secure the area," one of them barked. His voice was rough, but it didn't belong to him. It sounded distorted. "Take them to the facility. Keep them contained." The others nodded, their faces blank, their movements synchronized like clockwork. They didn't seem to notice me, at least not at first, but then one of them turned. I swear I saw something in his eyes. For a brief moment, his helmet shifted slightly, and I saw them. Those eyes, they weren't human. And then, before I could react, they were on me. I didn't know if they were real soldiers, or if they were just another part of whatever this nightmare had become. But they didn't speak again. They didn't need to. They just moved, fast, precise, and without hesitation. Their hands were on my arms, dragging me away from the tracks. My body screamed against the rough treatment, but it didn't matter. As they pulled me into the shadows, I heard the sound again. The sound of the thing that wasn't me. It was coming closer. I was locked in a sterile room. The walls were white, too white, and the air was frigid. There was nothing to hold on to, nothing to focus on. Just the harsh light above, casting shadows that seemed to pulse and shift. I was still trying to understand what had happened, what was happening. When the door opened, 2 men walked in. They wore the same black uniforms, but now they didn't have helmets. Their faces were pale, gaunt, and their eyes. I didn't recognize them. "Let's begin," one of them said. His voice was cold, clinical. He didn't even glance at me. He just stepped forward and picked up a small device. Something like a scanner. I opened my mouth to ask what was going on, but I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. One of the soldiers turned toward me. His eyes glinted in the dim light. "You're lucky. Most people don't survive this long." The other soldier smiled, but it wasn't a smile. "This long," I croaked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The soldier didn't answer. He just moved closer. And that was when I realized I was the experiment. I've been trying to piece it together in my head for days, trying to understand what's real and what's not. But nothing makes sense anymore. I was dragged from that sterile room. No explanation, no mercy. They didn't bother to tell me where they were taking me or why. It was just the same faceless soldiers, their black uniforms swallowing them whole, moving like shadows. And then they locked me in this place. I'm not even sure where I am anymore. The building, or whatever it is, feels alive. The walls are cold, but they pulse. The lights flicker like they're struggling to stay on, as though the very air here is fighting to break free from some unseen force. I can hear noises too. Low, thudding sounds in the distance. Sometimes it sounds like machinery, and sometimes it sounds like something else. I try to ask them, try to make them explain what was happening, but the soldiers are silent. They never speak. It's as if their mouths were sewn shut, and whatever commands they follow come from someone, something else. I still haven't seen the thing again. The thing that looked like me but wasn't. But I feel its presence. It's always there, lurking just beyond my reach like a shadow in the corner of my vision. I can feel it watching me, even when I can't see it. And the whispers, they're getting louder. I swear they're coming from inside my head, from somewhere deep in my mind, but when I try to focus on them, they fade, leaving only that gnawing feeling of dread gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I'm not sure if I'm losing my grip on reality or if the world around me is warping. Or maybe both. The first time they came for me, I didn't know what to expect. It was late, or at least I thought it was. Time feels irrelevant here. It's as if it has no meaning. But I remember the darkness pressing in around me, the cold seeping into my bones as I lay on the thin cot in the corner of the room. Then the door opened. I don't know how they do it, how they manage to move so silently, but I didn't hear them at first. It was like they appeared in the room. 4 of them, standing in the doorway, their black uniforms blending into the shadows. They were holding something long, like a metal rod with wires and flashing lights. It looked like some sort of weapon, but it didn't feel like one. I couldn't explain it, but the air shifted when they entered, like the very space around them bent in on itself. "Get up," one of them ordered. His voice was flat, robotic, like it had been stripped of any human emotion. I didn't move. I couldn't. "Get up." The command came again, louder this time. The thing that scared me wasn't just the order. It was the feeling behind it. A compulsion, a pressure that twisted my limbs and forced me to stand. I wasn't in control of my body anymore. I was just moving. They led me down a narrow hallway, the walls so close together, I felt like I was suffocating. The lights above buzzed erratically, casting strange shadows that seemed to shift with every step. The further we walked, the darker it became, until I couldn't see anything but the outline of the soldiers in front of me. I tried to speak, tried to ask them where we were going, but the words wouldn't come. It was like I had forgotten how to speak. The silence around me grew thicker until it was all-consuming. Every step I took felt like it echoed through an endless void, and the air grew heavier with each passing second. Eventually we reached a door, thick, reinforced, and sealed with some kind of strange glowing symbol. I couldn't make out the markings, but I knew instinctively that this was where they were taking me. They opened the door. Inside, the room was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was huge, stretching far beyond what seemed possible in this building. The walls were covered in some kind of translucent material, and from where I stood, I could see strange shapes moving behind them. Creatures or people. I couldn't tell. They were writhing, shifting in ways that defied the laws of nature. At the center of the room stood a massive structure, like a machine, or maybe a cage. It hummed with energy, and as I stepped closer, I felt a strange pressure building in my chest, as if something was pulling at my very soul. The soldiers didn't speak. They just pushed me forward. I stumbled toward the machine, my feet dragging as if they were made of lead. I was paralyzed, unable to break free from their hold. My body moving against my will. They strapped me in. I don't know how long I was in that machine. Time lost all meaning the moment the straps tightened around my wrists and ankles. The cold metal pressed against my skin, and I could feel the hum of energy coursing through the air. It felt like the very fabric of reality was being stretched thin, pulled apart. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then the lights flickered, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I wasn't in the machine anymore. I was in a small, dimly lit room, lying on a cold, hard surface. My limbs were sore, like they had been used in ways they shouldn't have been. My head throbbed with a dull pain, and my eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness. But something was different. I could feel them. They were in the room with me. I could hear the soft scrape of metal against stone, the faint hum of something alive. They were watching me, waiting for me to wake up. I could feel their eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. And then I heard the voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it felt like it was inside my head. Do you understand now? I wanted to answer. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then, through the darkness, I saw it. A figure stepped forward, its silhouette just barely visible against the shadows. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. Its body was elongated, its limbs stretching out in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Its skin was the color of ash, and its eyes were black holes, sucking the light out of the room. And it smiled. It smiled at me with a mouthful of sharp, jagged teeth. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. And I was the prey. Story 5. They will eat those who scream. It started with the scratching. Not loud, not even every night, but when it came, it was always beneath the floor. We lived in a small cul-de-sac in northern Pennsylvania, a neighborhood carved into the edge of dense forest and fractured rock. Our homes were old, most of them built over abandoned coal shafts no one bothered to mark anymore. Everyone joked about it. You'd hear stuff like, "Don't dig too deep or you'll fall through into an old miner's hell," or "The moles under your house probably have union benefits by now." But then children started going missing. My name is Caleb. I was 13 when it all happened. My sister Lainey was 9. We were close. She was the kind of kid who drew suns in the corners of notebook paper and still believed in fairies. She used to press her ear to the floor at night and whisper, "They're singing again." We thought she was joking. The first kid who vanished was Robbie. Lived 2 houses down from us. Quiet, kind of weird. always walked with his shoulders hunched like he was expecting something to fall from the sky. His parents thought he ran away. But I remember the night he disappeared. It was around 2 a.m. I was playing games on my phone under the covers when I heard something that made my skin crawl. It was a scream, short-clipped, and then something else. A low rumble, like a groan, rising through the earth. It sounded wet. I stared at my ceiling until dawn. When I asked Lainey the next morning if she'd heard it, she just blinked and said, "They took the boy who talks to himself." I didn't know what that meant. Not then. 2 more kids vanished that month. Emma, from across the street, and Dylan, who rode my bus. Same pattern. Gone during the night, no signs of forced entry. Doors still locked, windows still closed. But if you pressed your ear to the floorboards like Lainey did, you'd feel something. A heartbeat. We told our parents, of course. They laughed it off. "Maybe you kids need less sugar before bed," my mom said, stirring her coffee without looking up. No more creepy stories, all right? Even the police seemed confused. They drove around at night with their flashlights and false bravado, but you could tell. They didn't believe these were simple kidnappings. You could see it in the way they stopped making eye contact with us. Then came the night Lainey disappeared. I'll never forgive myself. It was cold that evening. October wind rattling the trees and dragging dead leaves across the sidewalks. We had just finished dinner, and Lainey was curled up on the couch, coloring. I was upstairs in my room with headphones on, watching YouTube. Around midnight, something pulled me out of sleep. Not a noise, a feeling, like someone standing next to the bed, watching. My skin prickled, as if a cold hand had reached beneath the blanket and stroked my spine. I sat up fast, headphones falling to the floor. The house was silent, but there it was again. Scratching, coming from downstairs. I crept into the hallway, heart slamming in my chest. "Lainey?" I whispered. No answer. I tiptoed down the staircase, every wooden step groaning under my weight. The living room was dark, but the front door was wide open. My stomach dropped. Outside, the yard was empty. No sign of struggle, no footprints in the frost-covered grass. But I felt something watching, from below. That's when I noticed it. The rug by the coffee table was off-center, bunched near the edge like something had been dragged. I peeled it back. Underneath, the hardwood looked wrong, warped, swollen. I knocked on it lightly, and it echoed. There was a hole, perfectly cut, about 3 feet wide, leading down into blackness that smelled of rot and damp soil. I stared into it, frozen, and I swear on everything I am. I saw fingers, pale, impossibly long fingers, curling back into the dark, as if they'd just let go of something. I screamed for my parents. They came running, but by the time they got there, the hole was gone. Just wood, seamless, like nothing had ever been touched. And Lainey? Lainey was gone. I don't remember much after that. Cops, therapists, the quiet pity in everyone's eyes. I stopped speaking for weeks, until a letter came, folded in an old envelope, sealed in dirt. No stamp, no return address. Just a single sentence written in red crayon. In Lainey's handwriting, "They only eat the ones who scream." That night I started digging. I dug behind the shed, where the grass never grew right, and the air always smelled metallic. For hours I clawed at the soil, deeper and deeper, until my hands bled. And then I found it. A tunnel, not made by men. The walls were uneven, covered in slick pulsing roots. The air was warm and smelled like meat left out in the sun. I don't know what made me crawl inside. Maybe it was her voice. It echoed from the dark. "Caleb, don't be loud." I went in. The tunnel sloped downward, and the deeper I went, the more the ground seemed to shift beneath me, breathing almost. I saw things carved into the walls. Symbols, teeth, bones etched in spirals. I don't remember how long I crawled, but eventually the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. It wasn't natural. It was built. Stone walls, arched ceilings, candles made of something that dripped and hissed. There were cages, dozens of them, and in one, I saw her, Lainey. She was thinner, her hair tangled, but her eyes were calm. She looked at me like she'd been expecting me. Then, behind me, movement. They were there. Not men, not animals, things made of earth and sinew, with hollow sockets for eyes and mouths that didn't open right. They moved like spiders, fast and jointless, and they didn't breathe. One of them reached toward me. Lainey shouted, "Don't scream!" I bit my lip until it bled. That's how chapter 1 ends. And if you think I escaped, you'd be wrong. I can still feel the dirt under my nails. The way it caked into my fingers, thick and choking, as I clawed at the tunnel walls in a desperate scramble. When I first found that hole under the house, I thought it was just a dream. I thought it had to be, because no sane person would ever crawl into something that dark, that cold, with the stench of decay wrapping itself around their neck like a tightening noose. But Lainey, my sister, she was in there. She had to be. And there was no way I was leaving her behind. At first I thought I could hear her voice, muffled, like she was calling from the far end of the earth itself. But when I pushed forward, the sound disappeared. I don't know what happened after that, but everything blurred. My movements became frantic. My thoughts scattered. It was as if the tunnel itself was alive, pulling me deeper, urging me to go faster. I don't know how long I crawled. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. But the further I went, the heavier the air became, thick with the stench of mildew and something worse, something rancid, like rotting meat. My heart raced, thumping so loud in my chest that I could barely hear my own breath. Every time I thought I heard something behind me, I'd force myself to look back. Nothing. But the darkness? It was a weight, a pressure against my chest that felt almost like it was trying to push me further into the abyss. Then I saw it, the faintest glimmer of light, like a lantern's flicker, deep in the distance. For a split second, I thought I was imagining things, but it didn't fade. It drew me in like a magnet, pulling me faster, faster, until I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only move. As I rounded the final bend of the tunnel, the light became blinding. It weren't natural light, not from any sun or star. It was a sickly yellow glow, coming from a source I couldn't see. And then finally, I stepped out into an open space. But it wasn't anything like I expected. The chamber was vast, too vast to be underground. The walls were slick with a black, tar-like substance that dripped down in slow, steady streams. There were pillars in the room, not stone or wood, but something organic. They twisted and turned like the trunks of ancient trees, but covered in veins that pulsed with a faint, eerie rhythm. And the smell, it hit me all at once. Something sharp, acidic, almost metallic. My stomach churned, and for a moment, I thought I was going to throw up. But then I saw her. Lainey. She was standing in the center of the room, her back to me. Her head tilted slightly to one side, as though she could hear something I couldn't. Her hair was tangled, matted with dirt, but her eyes, they weren't wide with fear. They were calm, too calm. "Lainey?" I whispered, stepping forward. The words barely escaped my mouth. Everything felt muffled, like I was underwater. She didn't turn. Something inside me twisted. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't place it. I reached out for her, my hand trembling as I took another step. "Lainey," I said again, louder this time. This time, she responded. Her voice came soft, almost distant, like it was coming from far away. "They're watching." I froze. My blood ran cold. I didn't ask who she meant. I already knew. I glanced around the room. My eyes flicked from one dark corner to the next, trying to make out shapes in the shadows. But nothing moved. Nothing. Except the walls. They were alive. I saw it then. It wasn't just the pillars. The entire room seemed to breathe. The veins running through the walls, the black, slithering substance that dripped from the ceiling. All of it was pulsing, contracting, like the entire space was a living organism, feeding on something, feeding on us. "Lainey," I whispered, stepping closer. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice flat. I halted in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat. "What?" She slowly turned around, and I saw the hollow look in her eyes. Emptiness, like she wasn't even there. "They come when you scream," she said. Her lips didn't move as she spoke. It was like her voice came from somewhere else, somewhere deeper than her. "You have to stay quiet. You have to be good." The words hit me like a slap. Good? What was she talking about? "Lainey, what's going on here? We need to get out of here, please." But she didn't answer. Something shifted in the shadows. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, scratching, loud, sharp, like claws, scraping against stone. Then another noise, a low, guttural growl that seemed to echo through the room. I turned quickly, my body locking in place as I searched the dark corners. It was them, the creatures. I didn't know how many there were, but I could feel them. Thousands of eyes watching from the darkness, tracking every move. Their presence suffocated the air, made my chest tight and my breath shallow. And then I saw them, emerging from the shadows. They were nothing like anything I'd ever seen. Their bodies were long, twisted, pale, featureless faces with empty sockets where eyes should have been. They had gaping mouths that didn't open right, their jaws hanging wide like they were made to devour something bigger than just flesh. Their hands were thin, spindly, ending in claws that scraped against the floor as they moved. And the worst part? They were smiling, but it wasn't a smile of pleasure. It was a smile of hunger. "Lainey!" I screamed, and instantly a wave of pain shot through my head. My skull felt like it was splitting in two, like something was trying to claw its way out from inside me. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air as I clutched my head in agony. The creatures circled us now, slowly, steadily. "Lainey," I whispered, barely able to speak through the pain. She didn't look at me. "They'll eat you if you scream," she said again. And then they were on me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. But they didn't need me to. They could smell fear. And I was trembling all over. The first one reached out, its claws brushing my arm, and the touch was cold, like death itself. I didn't want to look, didn't want to know what it was about to do, but I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head, just slightly, and saw the monster's face. It wasn't a face at all. It was a mask. A featureless mask, but something inside it seemed to twitch, as if it was learning how to smile, how to feed. And that's when I understood. It wasn't about silence. It was about survival. They never came close enough to touch me, but I could feel their hunger growing. The creatures moved away, their claws scraping against the stone as they returned to the shadows. And all I could do was sit there, trembling, eyes wide, and wonder how much longer I would be able to stay quiet before the hunger inside me broke. Lainey wasn't the same. She had changed, and I realized then that I wasn't here just to save her. I was here to survive. I had to outlast them. I don't know how much time passed after the creatures circled me. It felt like days, but when I looked up, everything was the same. The same black walls that seemed to breathe, the same pulsating veins, the same overwhelming scent of decay. The glow that filled the cavern was still sickly, like the light was trying to hide from itself, too afraid to show what it was truly illuminating. But I couldn't stay still anymore. I looked at Lainey, still standing in the center of the room, her back turned to me. She wasn't the same, not the sister I knew. Her hair hung limp around her face, and her skin was pale, almost translucent. It wasn't just the environment, something about her had changed. I didn't know if it was the creatures or the place itself, but she wasn't the same girl who would laugh at my terrible jokes or scream when I scared her at night. I couldn't just stand there, waiting. I had to move. I forced myself to stand, but my legs felt like they were made of jelly, trembling with every step. The pain in my head from the scream, the pressure that seemed to fill every inch of my skull, was unbearable. But I couldn't let it stop me. "Lainey," I called out, my voice hoarse from the strain. She didn't move. I took another step forward, my heart pounding in my chest, louder than my breath. The creatures watched from the shadows, but they didn't move closer. Not yet. "Lainey," I shouted, desperate this time. "Please, we need to get out of here." Her head tilted slowly to the side. Her eyes didn't meet mine, but I saw something flicker within them. A shadow of recognition. Then it was gone. "They watch," she murmured, her voice soft and distant. "They wait." Her words chilled me to the bone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her remember who she was, who I was. But I couldn't. I couldn't even move toward her, not with the creatures lurking, circling the room like vultures waiting for their prey to make a wrong move. "Lainey, please," I whispered. "Don't let them take you. Don't let them change you." For a moment, I thought she might answer, that something deep inside her would wake up. But she didn't. Instead, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were different, darker. "You should be quiet," she said, and there was something about her voice, something cold, something almost otherworldly, that made my blood run cold. A chill ran through me, and I turned away. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't let her slip further away. So I moved. I moved toward the far side of the room, where I had seen the first of the creatures slink back into the shadows. I didn't dare look back. If I did, I might lose my nerve. I found a doorway, or at least I thought it was a doorway, an archway carved into the stone, so dark I couldn't see past it. A part of me screamed to turn back, to find a way to escape. But I couldn't leave Lainey. I couldn't leave her in that dark place, surrounded by those creatures. I stepped through. The moment I did, the air shifted. It was heavier here, suffocating, as if the tunnel was pulling the oxygen out of the room and replacing it with something foul. I gagged, stumbling forward, my hand reaching for the walls to keep me steady. My fingers brushed against something smooth and wet, like the surface of an old decaying animal. I recoiled, my breath catching in my throat. I moved faster. The tunnel was tighter here, forcing me to crawl. The air growing thicker, almost suffocating. And the sound. Oh, the sound was worse. The faint scratching I had heard before was louder now, more distinct, like claws scraping across metal. It reverberated through my skull, making me dizzy, making my stomach churn with fur. I didn't know how much longer I could go on like this. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The only thing I could focus on was the sound of my heartbeat and the claws behind me. I reached the end of the tunnel. I don't know how I knew, but I knew it. I felt it in the very marrow of my bones, the thick, suffocating presence of something waiting for me. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't dare see the creatures inching closer behind me, their silent footsteps drawing nearer. I had to get to the end. I had to escape. But when I reached the end of the tunnel, I found myself facing another door. This one was different, though. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't made of stone, nor was it natural at all. This one was metal, cold, steel, and smooth. I reached out for it, hesitating, my fingers trembling against the surface. Something moved on the other side. I could hear it, the low rumble of something heavy, shifting, something large, and the scratching. It was louder now, like the walls themselves were being torn apart from the inside. I didn't want to open it, but I had no choice. I pushed the door open, and there it was. The room beyond was cavernous, stretching out into darkness, but there was something in the center of the room. A shape I couldn't quite make out. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. It was them, the creatures. They were standing in a circle, huddled together, their pale bodies trembling in the darkness. Their faces, no, their masks, twitched with unnatural movements, as if they were trying to communicate with each other. And from the center of the room, the smell was overwhelming. Rotten meat, sour, bitter, like something had died there, long ago. But it wasn't just that. The creatures weren't alone. Something was feeding in the center of the room. A figure, a shadow of flesh and bone. A person, or something like a person, lay there in the center of their circle. And the creatures weren't just watching. They were feeding. I didn't want to look. I couldn't look. But something in me forced my eyes to the figure. And that's when I saw it. It was a child, one of the missing children. I knew him. His name was Danny. He used to live 2 blocks down from us. I hadn't seen him in weeks, hadn't heard from him. But now, here he was, his body twisted and limp in the center of the room. And the creatures, they weren't just feeding off him. They were changing him. I could see it happen. Slowly, methodically, the body of Danny began to twitch. His fingers curled, his eyes snapped open, and his face twisted into something not quite human. And then, just like that, he stood up. He wasn't Danny anymore. And he wasn't one of them either. He was something else, something worse. And that's when the realization hit me. This was their process. This is how they turned us, how they made us into them. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for my soul. I backed away, my breath ragged, my legs buckling beneath me. The creatures didn't notice me, didn't care. They were too busy with their meal. But I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay hidden. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to get out of there before they came for me next. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned, each desperate gasp feeling like fire scraping against my chest. The room around me, the creatures, the whispers, the empty eyes of the child, everything blurred into one dark, suffocating mass of fear. I stumbled backward, hands scraping against the cold stone walls, my mind spiraling into panic. I needed to get out of here. I had to get out, but the door was gone. I turned, frantically searching, but the metal door had disappeared as if it had never been there at all. There was only darkness now, thick, stifling, and endless. The creatures weren't looking at me anymore. Their focus was on the child in the center of the room, the thing that was once Danny. And I knew, in the deepest part of my soul, that if I didn't move, if I didn't escape now, I'd end up just like him. I forced myself to turn and ran. My heart pounded in my throat, my legs nearly giving way under me as I stumbled through the cavernous space. I couldn't stop to think, couldn't stop to wonder what was happening to me. I could only run. Run until the world around me collapsed into the darkness. The scratching followed me. It wasn't a sound. It was a presence, a feeling, as though the walls themselves were alive and crawling after me. The veins beneath the stone pulsing, stretching, tightening with each step I took. I could feel the cold fingers of the creatures in the darkness, brushing against the back of my neck. The crawl of something far worse than death reaching out for me. I didn't know where I was going. There was no map here, no way out. But I kept running, my feet pounding against the uneven stone floor, my breath ragged, my mind scattered. And then I saw it, a crack in the wall. Not big, not much bigger than the width of my hand. But it was there. A thin line of light shining through the stone. I rushed toward it, my fingers desperate to claw at the edges, to pull it open, to escape whatever nightmare was closing in on me. The crack shifted. The stone groaned as though it had been disturbed after centuries of stillness. And then, suddenly, the wall gave way. I tumbled through, into a narrow tunnel, gasping as my hands scraped against the rough earth. I didn't dare look back. I didn't care where the crack had led me. I just needed to go anywhere but there. The air here was thick and humid. My skin crawled as I scrambled forward, my fingers slipping against the wet walls. And it was colder here too. Colder than the cavern. Colder than the pit I had just left behind. A strange biting cold that seemed to seep into my bones and freeze the blood in my veins. I stumbled through the tunnel, the space narrowing until it was barely wide enough for me to crawl. There was something in the air here, something that made every breath harder to take. My head swam with dizziness. The sharp, metallic taste of fear was so thick in my mouth that I could hardly swallow. I forced myself to keep moving, my hands shaking as I pressed forward. I didn't know how long I crawled, but it felt like days. The sound of my own breath was deafening, and the silence around me was oppressive, suffocating. Every now and then, I thought I heard something behind me. Scratching, the slow shuffle of feet, something brushing against the walls. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. Nothing but the same endless tunnel stretching out before me. And then I saw it. Light, a faint, flickering glow at the end of the tunnel. It was faint at first, like a dying candle. But as I crawled toward it, it grew brighter, warmer. I pushed myself faster, my arms trembling, my fingers raw from scraping against the earth. The light grew stronger, and I could feel the warmth on my face, like the first rays of sunlight after a long, dark winter. I reached the end. The tunnel opened up into a small chamber. The walls here were smooth, polished even, like they had been carved into place with precision. There were no veins, no pulsing energy, just stillness and the light. It wasn't sunlight. I didn't know what it was at first, but then I saw the source. A stone altar, small but intricately carved, standing in the center of the room. On it, a glowing crystal. No, not just a crystal, something more. It was alive, glowing from within, with tendrils of light flickering in and out like the pulse of a heart. The light it emitted wasn't warm though. It was cold. Cold, like the kind of light that flickers in the middle of a storm when everything feels wrong, when the world seems off kilter. I couldn't look away. My eyes were locked on the crystal, my breath catching in my chest as I stepped forward, drawn to it like a moth to flame. I don't know why. I don't know what possessed me to reach out, but my hand was already moving, my fingers trembling as I extended them toward the source of the light. And just before my fingers touched the surface, a voice echoed in my head. "Don't touch it." I froze, my hand hanging in midair. The voice wasn't my own. It wasn't Lainey's. It wasn't the creature's. It was something other. Something that had been watching me. "It will feed on you too." I recoiled, my pulse racing as the crystal pulsed in response. The light flickering brighter, more erratic. My breath quickened, panic surging through me. I could feel the pressure of something close, something watching. And then the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled back, my feet slipping on the smooth stone floor as the room began to warp, to twist around me. The walls shifted, the ceiling bending downward, the very air compressing as the light from the crystal grew stronger, colder. "It's too late," the voice whispered. "They're already here." I tried to move, to run, but my body wouldn't cooperate. My legs were leaden, as if they were made of stone. I was trapped. I was being pulled toward it. The scratching returned, but this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from within. I couldn't scream. My throat felt like it was closing, my mouth dry, my lungs frozen in place. I looked down at my hands, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The skin was starting to change. The fingers were elongating, twisting. My breath caught in my throat as my nails grew, sharp and jagged, claw-like. I watched in horror as the flesh of my hands began to lose its color, turning pale, translucent, almost wet. "It's already begun," the voice said. And that's when I realized I was becoming one of them. The hunger started to rise in my chest, gnawing at me like an animal trapped inside, desperate to break free. I couldn't think. I couldn't reason. All I could focus on was the pull of the crystal, the way it called to me, beckoning me toward it. I wasn't sure how much longer I could fight it. Story 6. The Eyes from the Darkness. It was just another night, the kind of night where everything felt a little too quiet, a little too still. I had spent the evening at a friend's house far too late for someone who had work the next day. But there I was, walking home alone. The streets were deserted, lit only by the occasional flicker of a street light. The kind of street light that made everything feel like it was bathed in an eerie glow, almost as though reality itself was warping. I didn't live far from my friend's house, just a few blocks away. The walk was supposed to be uneventful, just another routine. But the air felt off tonight, thick with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was the kind of feeling you get when someone is watching you, even if there's no one in sight. I didn't want to be paranoid. I mean, it's just the way your mind plays tricks on you in the dark, right? But as I walked, I started to hear it. A soft scraping noise from below. I paused and looked around, trying to pinpoint the source, but there was nothing. Just the empty streets and the low hum of the city behind me. The sound came again, this time a little clearer. It was definitely from the ground, but it wasn't the wind or anything natural. It was purposeful, like something or someone was down there. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickened my pace, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe a rodent, maybe the wind pushing something around in the sewers. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I felt it. Something was wrong. I tried to shake it off, pushing the thought to the back of my mind. I kept walking, but the sound didn't stop. In fact, it seemed to be getting louder, like it was following me, moving closer and closer as I moved forward. And that's when I saw it. It was subtle at first, something I almost missed. A shadow shifting in the gutter just past the sidewalk. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the drain, feeling my heart rate spike. There was nothing there, nothing I could see, but the hairs on my neck stood on end. The noise. It wasn't just scraping anymore. It had changed, turned into something almost rhythmic, like something was tapping against the inside of the drain. I leaned in closer, my breath catching in my throat. It was dark, too dark to see clearly, but I could have sworn I saw something moving beneath the grates. Something red. I took a step back, and in that instant, the tapping stopped. I froze. The street seemed even quieter now, unnervingly so. I glanced around again, hoping to see someone, anything, that could explain what was happening. But the street was still empty. I was alone. I took another step back, my mind racing. It had to be a trick of the light, right? A shadow, or maybe a reflection. I was just overthinking things. But then, I heard it again. A soft, wet noise. It came from the drain, but this time, it was louder. Almost as if it had crawled closer, like it was waiting for me to move. And that's when I saw it. 2 eyes. Red. They stared up at me from the darkness, glowing faintly in the dim street light. For a second, I thought I might be imagining things. But then they blinked. I gasped and stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. My feet didn't move fast enough, and I tripped over the curb, landing hard on the pavement. My breath came out in ragged gasps as I scrambled to get up, to get away from the drain. The eyes didn't blink again. They just stayed there, watching. The drain was too small for anything to fit through. There was no way whatever was down there could get to me, right? But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer. I pushed myself up and ran, my breath coming in short bursts as I sprinted down the street. The further I got, the more the image of those eyes stayed with me, burned into my memory. My pulse was still racing, my mind frantic, but I couldn't look back. I had to get home. I had to get away. I turned the corner, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever had been lurking in the drain. But as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw something that stopped me cold. A shadow. It was following me. I could barely make it out, but there was something moving in the dark, just on the edge of my vision. It was subtle, like a figure slinking along the side of the road, staying just out of the light. My heart skipped a beat as the realization hit me. Whatever had been in the drain was now following me, stalking me through the night. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run faster, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, and my vision blurred from the rush of adrenaline. I turned another corner, pushing myself harder, my shoes slapping against the wet pavement. But the shadow didn't disappear. It stayed with me, moving at a steady pace, always just a step behind. By the time I reached my street, I was nearly in a full panic, but I didn't dare look behind me. I ran up the steps to my apartment building, fumbling for my keys. When I finally got the door open, I slammed it shut behind me, locking it with trembling hands. I leaned against the door, gasping for air, trying to calm myself down. I couldn't explain what had happened. Those eyes, those red eyes, had been real. But what had they been? What had been down there, in the drain? And why had it followed me? I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that it had to be. But deep down, I knew that what I had seen was far from ordinary. Something was out there, something that had been watching me. And I was sure it wasn't done yet. The next few days, after what happened on the walk home, felt like an endless blur. Each hour stretching on as I tried to get a grip on the events that had occurred. I hadn't told anyone about what happened. How could I? Who would believe me? Red eyes in the drain, a shadow stalking me through the streets. It all sounded too crazy, even for me to accept. The fear didn't fade, though. If anything, it grew. I couldn't get the image of those eyes out of my mind. I spent every night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail in my head over and over again. My heart would race, and my breath would become shallow, as if the eyes were still watching me. Even in the safety of my apartment, I felt the presence of something dark, lingering just outside, just waiting. It was stupid, I knew. I had to stop letting my mind spiral. But every little noise, every creak in the walls, every whisper of wind outside sent my mind into overdrive. I started leaving the lights on at night, even though I usually preferred the darkness. But now, I couldn't bear the thought of being alone in the shadows, with those eyes watching me. I tried to shake it off, tried to ignore the paranoia that crept in. But the feeling of being hunted never left. It was like something had opened a door, in my mind, something I couldn't close again. And every time I stepped outside, it was as though I could feel it waiting, like the thing from the drain was out there, somewhere, following me. One evening, a week after the incident, I was walking home again. It had been a long day, and I was too exhausted to think straight. The streets were quiet, and the only sounds were the dull hum of the city and the occasional passing car. I felt a strange calmness, like the universe was telling me it was all in my head. that it was time to move on. But as I neared the corner where I had first seen the eyes, I froze. The air around me shifted. I couldn't explain it. There was no wind, no change in the weather, but something felt wrong. It was like the night had become heavier, thicker, almost suffocating. And then I heard it. The same tapping sound. Low, rhythmic, coming from the drain. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't believe it. After a week of trying to push this all out of my mind, here it was again. The sound I had been trying to convince myself was just my imagination. But now, standing there on that quiet street, I knew it wasn't. The noise grew louder, almost as though whatever was down there was approaching. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat dry, my legs frozen to the pavement. The tapping continued, steady, deliberate. But now it sounded like it was coming from more than just one drain. It was all around me, echoing off the buildings, coming from every direction. It was as though something was moving beneath the street, stalking me. I took a few steps back, my breath becoming shallow, my mind racing. What was happening? What was this? I had to leave, had to get away from here. I turned to walk in the opposite direction, but before I could even take a step, I heard it. A low, raspy voice. Help! I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. My eyes scanned the street, looking for the source, but there was no one there. No one. Help! The voice came again, clearer this time, like it was right next to me. I looked down. The drain. The voice was coming from the drain. My legs felt like they were made of stone, unable to move, even as the voice continued to call for help, growing more frantic with every passing second. Please, help me. I can't breathe. I can't. It was enough. The fear that had been building inside me finally broke free, and I ran. I didn't care about the sound of the voice or the tapping anymore. I just had to get away. I sprinted down the street, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of terror. But the voice didn't stop. It followed me. Help. Please. I could hear it trailing behind me, getting louder, as though it was right behind me, just out of sight. It sounded desperate, pleading for help, but I couldn't stop. I had to get away, had to escape whatever was calling to me. I turned a corner, trying to lose whatever was chasing me, but as I looked behind, I saw it. The shadow. It was there again. The same dark shape, slinking along the edge of the sidewalk, just on the periphery of the streetlights. It was following me, always staying just out of the light. Its movements quick and fluid, like it was stalking me. I stumbled, my legs too weak to keep up with the fear that was gripping my chest. I had to keep running, but the shadow seemed to be getting closer, faster, as if it were catching up to me with every step. I turned another corner, my breath ragged, my thoughts a chaotic mess. I couldn't outrun it. Whatever it was, whatever had been lurking beneath the street, it was closing in on me. The voice was still calling for help, still following me. I felt like I was losing my mind. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. My body was moving on its own, like it was in survival mode, fighting against the fear, fighting against the impossible. And then I reached the end of the street. There was no more running, no more escaping. I stopped panting, feeling my chest tighten as I turned to face the shadow, the thing that had been following me. I didn't want to look, didn't want to face whatever was coming, but I had no choice. The street was empty. There was no shadow, no sound. The voice had stopped too. The tapping was gone. But something had changed. The street, which had always felt so normal, so safe, now felt foreign. The air was still thick with dread, as though something had just passed through, leaving behind an imprint I couldn't shake. I stood there for what felt like hours, my mind racing. Had I imagined it all? Was this some kind of sick joke my mind was playing on me? I didn't know, but as I turned to head home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home that night. And it wasn't done with me yet. The days following that night felt unreal. It was as though I had stepped into a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The quiet of the street, the tapping, the voice. Everything had settled into my mind like a deep, gnawing ache. I kept telling myself that I should have let it go. I should have pushed it out of my mind, chalked it up to my overactive imagination. But something about that night, something in my gut, told me it wasn't just my mind playing tricks. I hadn't told anyone what had been happening. Who could I tell? That I was being stalked by something that lived in the drains, something with eyes that followed me. It sounded insane. But the more time passed, the more I felt like I was losing control. The world around me felt distorted, like I was walking through someone else's dream, and everything was just slightly off-center. I tried to go on with my life. I went to work, I saw friends, and I tried to keep up appearances. But the shadows that hung over me were always there, lurking just out of sight. I couldn't walk home without glancing nervously at every drain, every sewer grate I passed. I avoided certain streets entirely, the ones where the tapping had been the loudest. It was a constant game of evasion, of trying to outrun the fear that gripped my chest every time I stepped outside. But no matter where I went, no matter how far I tried to distance myself from the source, it always felt like it was right behind me. It had become a constant companion, a presence that I couldn't shake. And then it started again. One evening, as I was heading home from work, the familiar tap, tap, tap echoed in the air. It was soft at first, barely perceptible, but it was enough to freeze me in my tracks. I looked around, instinctively glancing at the sidewalk, the drains, but there was nothing there. No one in sight, no cars passing by, just the empty street. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs felt like they were made of stone, as if the earth had somehow anchored me to the spot. My heart was thudding in my chest, a rapid, frantic beat that drowned out everything else. I tried to breathe, to calm myself, but it was impossible. The tapping was growing louder now, closer, as though it was coming from beneath me. I turned slowly, trying to locate the source of the sound, but it was everywhere. It wasn't coming from just one drain anymore. It was as if the entire street, the entire neighborhood, was alive with it. The tapping sounded like it was all around me, beneath the ground, behind the walls, in the sewers and gutters. I could almost feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard it. The voice. It was softer this time, barely a whisper at first. Help? Please. I froze. My throat tightened, and a wave of nausea hit me. The voice was so familiar now, a haunting echo of the night I had first heard it. The desperation in it made my blood run cold. Help me, it repeated. But this time, it wasn't coming from a drain. I whipped around, searching for the source. But again, there was nothing. No one. The street was still empty. the darkness settling in as the sun dipped below the horizon. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't even tell where the voice had come from, but I could feel it, like it was inside my head, like it was pulling me, urging me to follow. But I didn't. I couldn't. I turned and began walking again, faster this time, my heart hammering in my chest, my eyes darting from side to side. The voice grew fainter, but the tapping, the rhythmic scraping, continued. It didn't stop. It was relentless. As I neared my apartment, I tried to shake off the feeling that I was being followed. My footsteps echoed through the street, but there was something else. Something darker, just at the edge of my hearing. I could feel it. Something moving, shifting, like it was crawling beneath the earth itself, following my every move. I turned the corner into my building's parking lot, and as I reached the door, I heard the tapping again. This time, much closer. It was as though the sound had been following me, keeping pace with my every step. I fumbled with my keys, the metal jangling in my trembling hands. I pushed the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and locked it with shaking fingers. I pressed my back against the door, gasping for breath, trying to calm my racing heart. For a moment, there was nothing. The silence of my apartment was suffocating. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had escaped it. That whatever it was had finally given up. But then I heard it again. The tapping. Louder now, from inside the building. I froze. I could hear the sound coming from the hallway outside my apartment. It was subtle at first, a soft scratching on the floor, like fingernails dragging across concrete, but it was unmistakable. I backed away from the door, my mind spiraling into panic. It was inside. Somehow, it had gotten inside. But how? I had locked the door. No one else was here. I was alone. I could hear it getting closer, that tapping, that unmistakable rhythm, as though something or someone was moving down the hallway just outside my door. I held my breath, my heart in my throat, and waited. And then I heard it. A whisper. A voice. Help. It was close now. So close. I could almost feel it. My body went rigid, my legs frozen in place. The whisper seemed to crawl through the door, seeping into my mind, into my very bones. Please. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. My mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening, but nothing made sense. The voice. Where was it coming from? Why couldn't I escape? I stepped back, my body instinctively moving away from the door. But just as I did, I heard something I never thought I'd hear. The unmistakable sound of nails scratching against the door. Something was on the other side, dragging itself along the wood, as though it were trying to claw its way in. I could feel the pressure building, my heart racing, every second feeling like an eternity. I knew then that whatever had been following me, whatever had been in the drain, wasn't done. It wasn't just a shadow or a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it was here, and I was trapped with it. I backed away, my eyes locked on the door, terrified that it would break open at any moment. But no matter how much I wanted to escape, I couldn't. I was rooted in place by a fear so deep, so primal, that it seemed to paralyze me. And then, through the door, I heard it once more. Help.